Did you know there was a four-wheeler that carried the heart of a street legend? The Yamaha Banshee 350 wasn't born ordinary. It was born with the engine of the legendary RD350 beaten inside it. Yes, the same two-stroke twin-cylinder that shook up the streets, now roaring in the sand. The result? A wild, explosive, and absolutely addictive machine. Today, we're going to find out how Yamaha turned a two-stroke superbike into a desert monster, creating one of the most beloved and feared beasts in history. Late 1980s, United States. There was a very particular kind of mechanical fever going on. The Glamis Dunes, the deserts of Arizona, and the makeshift tracks in California were the stage for a new religion, sport ATVs. They weren't work tools. They weren't utility vehicles. They were toys for adults with gasoline in their veins. The culture of faster, louder, wilder was at its peak. In that context, Japanese manufacturers were competing fiercely. Honda dominated the market with the Honda TRX 250R, popularly known as the Four-Trax 250R. Lightweight, agile, competitive, and surprisingly refined for a two-stroke. Suzuki answered with the Suzuki LT250R, the famous quad racer. More aggressive, more radical, more race-ready, straight from the factory. The battles were fought on sand, on short tracks, and on endless straightaways, where whoever hit the throttle hardest instantly earned respect. But Yamaha didn't just want to compete, they wanted to do something different. While everyone else was developing engines specifically for ATVs, Yamaha already had something tried and tested sitting on the shelf. Something dangerous, something that had already scared thousands of motorcyclists on the road, an engine from a bike that was already a legend. The engine from the Yamaha RD350, a parallel twin-cylinder, 347 cubic centimeters, two-stroke, liquid-cooled with the YPVS, Yamaha Power Valve System. That detail changed everything. It allowed for usable torque at low and mid-range without losing that brutal explosion at the top end. It wasn't a tame engine. It was an engine with a split personality. Civilized at the bottom, wild at the top. On the road, the RD350 already had a reputation for being a machine for the brave. In an ATV, that bordered on irresponsibility. Yamaha didn't invent a new engine, they actually did something even crazier. They reused one, and that's where the genius was. Because that engine was already developed, it already had a reputation, it was already reliable as a two-stroke can be, and above all, it already had a true sporting soul. The decision was simple in concept and brutal in execution, put a sport bike hard into a four-wheeler chassis. At a time when marketing was all about control, Yamaha bet on character. In an era when the sport ATV world was starting to become more professional, Yamaha decided to make it visceral again. That was the atmosphere leading up to the birth of the Banshee. It wasn't an accident. It was a direct response to a culture that wanted more speed, more noise, and fewer filters. The 80s weren't a cautious decade. They were a decade of mechanical excess. And Yamaha understood it was the perfect time to launch something that didn't need to exist, but everyone wanted. Back in the year 1987, Yamaha officially announced something that many engineers had probably been trying to avoid for quite some time, and something that thousands of dedicated fans had, perhaps without even realizing it, been eagerly waiting for. The Yamaha Banshee 350 was born, known internally as the IFZ 350. It wasn't an evolution, it wasn't an improvement, it was a declaration of mechanical war. Yamaha took the heart of the Yamaha RD350, adapted it to an ATV chassis, and created something that didn't fit into any existing category. It wasn't a utility quad. It wasn't a typical recreational ATV. It was a machine born exclusively to accelerate, drift, and scare you. Exactly 347 cubic centimeters. Parallel twin cylinder. 180-degree crankshaft. Two-stroke cycle. Reed valve intake. liquid cooling with a front radiator, IPVS system, variable exhaust valve, 6-speed gearbox with manual clutch, over 50 real horsepower in stock configuration, along with an approximate dry weight of 175 kilos. It was like giving a superbike engine to someone that had no business having one. The IPVS system was the key to its split personality. At low revs, the valve kept the exhaust flow optimized to generate usable torque. But when the engine revved up, the valve opened fully and unleashed all the fury of the two-stroke. The result was a progressive power delivery. Until it stopped being progressive, because above 6,000 RPM, the Banshee stopped pushing and started attacking. And that's when it became dangerous. Most ATVs of the time used single-cylinder engines with predictable power delivery. The Banshee used a twin-cylinder engine originally designed for a road sport bike. That meant less vibration, more ability to rev higher, and a much more aggressive power curve. But the most outrageous thing wasn't the engine, it was the weight at just 175 kilos. The power-to-weight ratio was insane for a production ATV. It was closer to a sport bike than to a conventional off-road vehicle. It was a vehicle that accelerated like a motorcycle, but with 4 wheels trying to keep up. The chassis was made of tubular steel, designed to be strong but relatively lightweight. The independent front suspension and solid rear axle were built to handle the abuse of dunes, jumps, and violent acceleration. But no one was really prepared for the power it had, because the real secret of the Banshee wasn't its stock power, it was its potential. With simple modifications, exhaust, carburation, porting, the power could increase dramatically. 60, 70, even 80 horsepower weren't impossible numbers. And that's where the Banshee stopped being just a fast ATV and became a competition machine. In a straight line, it simply had no rival. Neither the Honda TRX 250R nor the Suzuki LT 250R could match its speed. Top speed. Those were more agile on closed circuits, sure. But in the dunes, on long straights and drag races, the Banshee ruled. It didn't turn better, it didn't brake better, but it accelerated better than all of them. The Banshee wasn't designed to be balanced, it was designed to be unforgettable. From the very beginning, it was clear that Yamaha hadn't just created a simple ATV. They had created a platform. A perfect base for modifications, racing, and culture. A machine that didn't ask for permission. A machine that demanded respect. And since 1987, nothing was ever the same again in the world of sport ATVs. While the world was slowly starting to move away from two-stroke engines, Yamaha made a decision that seemed to defy logic: to keep the beast alive. In the early 90s, environmental regulations started to get stricter. Manufacturers were betting on cleaner, more controllable engines, and ATVs were starting to become more utilitarian. But the Yamaha Banshee 350 was not utilitarian. It was visceral. It was emotional. And Yamaha knew it. Instead of completely redesigning it, Yamaha did something unexpected. They perfected it without changing its essence. The improvements were surgical, not radical. A dual front disc brake system, which greatly improved braking capability at high speeds. Progressive improvements to the front and rear suspension, increasing stability and absorption on rough terrain. Structural reinforcements to the chassis to withstand extreme use in competition and on dunes. Updates to the materials of internal components to improve durability. Aesthetic changes in graphics, colors, and finishes that kept the design fresh without altering its identity. But most importantly, the engine remained practically untouched. Yamaha understood something that few manufacturers do. When you create something perfect, you don't mess with it. That engine was still the same two-stroke twin derived from the RD350. It still had the same controlled aggression. It still offered a power-to-weight ratio that no four-stroke ATV could match at the time. The Yamaha Banshee 350 wasn't just a successful ATV, it was something much rarer. It was one of those vehicles that transcend their mechanical function and become cultural icons. It didn't matter if you were in the dunes of California, the desert of Dubai, the beaches of Brazil, or the sandhills of Argentina. If you heard that metallic sound, that sharp and violent two-stroke scream, you knew exactly what it was. You didn't need to see it. You recognized it by the sound. The Banshee didn't announce its presence. It imposed it. It became the absolute icon of the dunes. It wasn't the most comfortable, it wasn't the most modern, it wasn't the safest, but it was the most respected. Because in the sand, where physics punishes the weak, the Banshee thrived. Its lightweight, explosive power delivery, and unpredictable nature made it feel alive, almost as if it had a will of its own. And while the world moved toward cleaner, more controlled, more civilized engines, the Banshee stayed wild, and that made it something unique. It was produced from 1987 to 2012, 25 years, a quarter of a century, without radical redesigns, without reinventing itself, without betraying its essence. That in the motor industry is almost impossible. The Yamaha Banshee 350 became a legend not because it was perfect, but because no one could replace its unique character. It was the first fast vehicle for many people, teaching respect, control, and courage. More than just an ATV, it was an experience and a symbol of rebellion. Even after production stopped, it lives on in restorations, races, and memories, representing the last wild spirit of the true two-stroke. And if you want to check out the best two-stroke off-road vehicles, click on this video.